Hey everyone, welcome back to The Foundry, an explainer series brought to you by Forge College. So in our last lesson, we tackled the introduction to network selection. Today, we're diving straight into core security features within patterns. Now, this is a massive piece of the puzzle for the applied Solidity development track, specifically when you're designing smart wallet patterns. Honestly, I want you to think of designing a smart wallet security exactly like architecting a high security building, right? You need a rock-solid foundation, different floors for entirely different operations, and very specific gates to manage exactly who goes where. If you just toss everything into a single room with one key, well, you are literally asking for a disaster. Okay, so here's the actual architectural blueprint we're going to climb today. First, the overall security blueprint, then we'll check out the ground floor, which is all about keys, moving up to the middle floor for policies, and the top floor for recovery. After that, we'll look at a real-world creator wallet example, and finally wrap up with checkpoints and next steps. Let's kick things off with part one, the security blueprints. You see, smart wallet patterns rely on these really discrete foundational security features to shape exactly who can do what and under what precise conditions. And this maps directly back to those authority models we were just learning about. So our starting point here is what we call threat surface mapping. This is our core engineering method. Before we install a single gate or lock in our building, we absolutely have to figure out where the attackers might try to break in. Who are the actors? What interfaces can they actually touch? What capabilities do they have? I mean, you can't defend a door if you don't even know the door is there, right? And that mapping dictates our three main architectural layers. Step one is the ground floor, where we protect the foundation, the keys. Step two takes us to the middle floor, which is basically filled with policies designed to slow attackers down. And step three is the top floor, which handles emergency overrides and rescues. Moving right along to section two, the ground floor, which is all about key management. We're starting right at the foundation. This is where your primary signing keys live and where direct on-chain transaction controls are anchored. We use a whole variety of primitives down here. We're talking everything from single private keys and hierarchical, deterministic, or HD wallets to on-chain multi-signature schemes, and of course, hardware-backed keys. These are your ultimate source of truth. Honestly, dropping your hardware key into the couch cushions, that is a classic ground floor disaster waiting to happen. You just can't afford to lose the foundation. And that brings us to a super crucial point. If the foundation blows, the building falls. It really is that simple. If an attacker manages to compromise your ground floor keys, any fancy top floor mitigations you've got in place, they're only going to provide partial help at best. So, rule number one, always strengthen your foundation first. Okay, assuming our foundation is solid, let's walk up to the next level. Section 3, the middle floor, focusing on policy controls. This is where we install the internal bouncers and speed bumps of our smart wallet. Time locks delay state changes, which effectively buys you time to react if something looks off. Rate limits and spending allowances, those are there to drastically reduce your financial blast radius. And whitelists strictly restrict which contracts you can even interact with. Think of it like this. Rate limits are that essential policy preventing a compromised delegate account from buying, say, 10,000 pizzas on your dime in a single afternoon. And this perfectly leads us into delegated permissions. This is all about permitting third-party relayers or proxy contracts to execute actions, but, and this is key, within strictly pre-signed constraints. You'll often see this done using meta-transactions. Now, these are absolutely fantastic for user experience, mainly because the service can actually pay the gas fees for you, but they rely heavily on those middle floor policies we just talked about to remain safe. You have to constrain the delegate so they can only do exactly what you intended them to do. No funny business. Now, here is a terrifying question. What if the keys are lost entirely? It's the nightmare scenario, right? Those middle floor policies we just built up won't do a thing to help you if the ground floor keys are permanently gone. To solve this one, we actually have to take the elevator to the absolute top of our building. Enter social recovery. This is the process of using a quorum of trusted guardians to essentially restore your access. I like to think of social recovery as the emergency rescue helicopter landing right on the roof of your building. It is highly effective for swooping in and rescuing you when that ground floor gets locked tight. But just like a real helicopter, it requires incredibly careful coordination so the wrong people don't end up hijacking the chopper. Which officially brings us to section 4, the top floor, recovery mechanisms. Up here on the top floor, this layer handles all of the out-of-band controls and overrides that sit completely external to your standard day-to-day signing flow. We're managing guardians, quorums, and the ability to actually upgrade those guardian sets. Now, while these features will absolutely save your skin if you lose your keys, they introduce a brand new risk into the mix, which is collusion. If your guardians suddenly decide to team up against you, they could technically override your wallet. Because of that, they must be properly constrained by middle floor policies, like time locks. Let's just pause for a second and consolidate this entire architecture. Every single feature we've discussed, from multisig all the way up to social recovery, protects against a very specific threat. But importantly, they also introduce an immediate trade-off, like higher friction or slower operations. Oh, and by the way, if you're itching for a much deeper dive into the actual Solidity code behind these specific primitives, you can totally explore the wider learning programs and courses available at Forge College. Okay, enough theory. Let's put this blueprint into action. Section 5, the Creator Wallet. We are going to reverse engineer a theoretical smart wallet here, designed specifically for a digital creator who needs to delegate limited control to a marketplace relayer without giving up their ultimate custody. First things first, we map the threat surface by separating the actions. High-value actions like large withdrawals and contract upgrades are kept completely, entirely separate from low-value actions like making simple marketplace offers or minting basic assets. Next, we actually assign these actions to our different floors. So our creator uses a hardware-backed key and a multi-sig on the ground floor to protect those massive withdrawals. Meanwhile, up on the middle floor, we give the marketplace relayer allow-listed meta transactions so they can handle all the low-value day-to-day stuff smoothly. And we make sure all of that is bounded by time locks for any major upgrades. And what about up on the top floor? We set up 3 guardians with a quorum of 2. We're highlighting this specific social recovery setup because it's super practical. But remember the golden rule here. Any recovery action triggered by these 2 guardians must still be protected by a time lock from the middle floor. That way, if the guardians are somehow compromised, the creator actually has time to see the pending hostile takeover and hit the brakes. Let's move into our final review phase. Section 6, checkpoints and next steps. When you're out there designing or auditing your own smart wallet patterns, you absolutely need a concrete checklist to make sure your building is structurally sound. Here are your vital implementation checkpoints. You must verify structured, domain-separated signatures to prevent replay attacks. You've got to confirm unescalatable allowance logic. You must ensure your time locks are actually practical, not too short to be useless and not endlessly long. And you must separate duties for critical operations. Basically, running through this checklist ensures that your floors and gates will actually hold strong when put under pressure. So if there is one crucial point I want you to take away from this entire explainer, it's this. Ground floor key management defines your baseline risk. You simply cannot build a secure skyscraper on a swamp. It doesn't work. Always, always prioritize fixing ground floor weaknesses before you start relying on top floor social recovery mitigations. Which leaves us with this final kind of provocative thought. How much usability are you really willing to sacrifice for ultimate safety? Because every single gate you add creates friction for the user. We're going to be tackling exactly that trade-off in our next lesson, balancing security and usability. Until then, I definitely encourage you to head over to forge.college to continue your applied Solidity development journey and explore these concepts in much more depth. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.